Lives of great men all remind us we can live our lives sublime and departing leave behind us footprints in the sands of time.
He was born as my cousin, or I was born as his cousin, but he was more like my older brother and definitely a best friend.
God did me a favor in allowing him to be in my life. He did me a favor.
I've known Reverend Jr., as I affectionately call him, since I was a little girl. When I knew me, I basically knew Reverend Jr.
Everything he did, it was basically out of an obligation to continue the family, whether it was go and become senior pastor of Olivet, or even his decision to become president of the SCLC. It was all done out of a sense of duty for family.
A couple of things I remember in particular are driving up to Washington, D.C. with Howard for the Progressive Convention and having a flat along the way, and Howard hitchhiking with a trucker to get a new tire for the car while I waited at the car. Then I remember playing basketball at St. Peter in the gym before it was converted, and how after a couple of times up and down the court, Howard would be gasping for air and beg off so somebody could take his place.
Reverend Creasy was really my pastor, away from my pastor. He was my confidant. He was my friend. But I must say, not only did he love his family, he loved the church, and he loved his friends in the gospel.
I was at his church once, my wife, and I knew Creasy very intimately, being his neighbor. And he was preaching once, and he stood up into his congregation and said, I'm just a man. And it really, I've been to listened to a lot of pastors and how they preach and how they are so different than the congregation, but his whole sermon was this, that I'm just a man, I'm just like you.
Howard showed me the real definition of a friend.
When Andy and I first got married, he came up to me and hugged me and told me how much he loved me, and he prayed for our marriage. And he said, and I think that you were just the perfect person for him.
And Reverend Creasy was a very generous man, and he loved the vegetables here. We cook the fresh vegetables here at Busy Bee, and he would always love our vegetables.
He could always find his style here because he liked to dress, and he always had a smile on his face, and he was a perfect gentleman all the time.
What stood out to me with Dr. Creasy was, first of all, his political sense, his biblical sense, and then his common sense.
I've only had 2 pastors in my life. They both were Creasys. I'm so sorry.
Whenever my friends would describe him, be like, oh, you're talking about the cute light-skinned pastor? I was like, yeah, that's my pastor. But I never thought of him like that. He was kind of like another father to me.
He was such a great teacher. He would grab your attention. He would hold your attention.
None of us wanted to be preachers. And so part of what made Howard Jr. so different was that Howard accepted his call at an early age. And then it did not take God long to lift him. I was still in high school when Howard was pastoring.
He would grab me sometime and say, Reg, I want to learn how to hoop. He said, you and Gregory and Jasper, y'all can pull it, man. And he said, I want to do that. I said, well, Howard, you can't do that. You don't qualify. He said, what do you mean I don't qualify? I said, your hair's too curly. Your hair's too straight. You have to have curly hair to hoop. I said, then you're too white looking. And boy, we would laugh. I used to call him my white brother.
My family and I moved here in September of '05 due to Katrina. We had nowhere to go. Howard Creasy and his family opened their arms for us, and received help from them at that immediate point. But not just that point, they helped us to reestablish our ministry, get back on our feet. And Destiny Christian Center International in Fayetteville is where it is today because of Howard and his family.
For me, he was just the ultimate in being a teacher of the word, and I appreciate that. He can also let his hair down and just be a regular old person and a friend that you can laugh with, that you can joke with, but when he needs to tell you what you need to hear, he can do that too.
And there was one time, I'll never forget, that my mother was so embarrassed of me because I had become, I thought it was such an honor to become a Falcons cheerleader in 1986. I was so excited. But back then, the uniforms weren't anything like they are now. She thought it was just awful because I was showing my legs and I had a little V cut, and she was just mortified that I had done that. And it took Howard Jr. to go and sit with my mother and say, listen, Miss Bell, do you know that that is an honor and a privilege? Do you know how many women tried for that? And she was chosen and actually selected. That is an honor. And after that, it just smoothed the way.
He wouldn't judge you. No, like you could tell him anything and he wouldn't act a certain way about it. Because usually he could relate to your story.
Whenever I would preach, I'd call Howard because he knew more about the Bible than anybody else that I ever knew. He was a student of the Word.
He was always there. He was always an ear. It didn't matter of your social status, your financial background. He just had a heart for people.
God was using Howard in a way that he used few others.
He would call us all by name and he called me Mr. President. We can try to get another pastor to help do what he's been doing, but there's not a man on earth that can replace Pastor Creasy.
I was in shock. I knew that he was gone, but I guess it didn't sink in that he wasn't coming back. I wasn't ever gonna see him enter the side door and come sit in his spot.
Our parents were radio babies. We are television babies, but this new generation are technology babies. And what he had done was bridge the gap and energize SCLC with the youth.
Most recently, I saw Howard in his role as president of SCLC. And he was able to bring people together from all sides.
Dr. Howard Creasy saved SCLC. It was at the doorstep of disaster, extinction, a ruin. He brought it back. His passion, his charisma, his intellect, his all-out desire to redo, remake, rebrand this organization.
We knew that he had the ability to rally the troops. And the other thing is, he had that spirit where he had righteous indignation about the way that poor people were treated. I saw him in Louisiana, and when he spoke at that mass meetings where we're helping the people fill out their claims because of the oil spill, and he was absolutely passionate with that.
He knew how to put the right people in place. He didn't mind sharing the spotlight. He didn't mind putting the plan out there and laying it out for us. And not just laying his vision out for us, but bringing the people to the table, the right people to the table, and getting our input. And I love that about him. He wanted young people at the table. He wanted older people at the table. He wanted all in between. And he said, this is my vision. Tell me your vision. Let's see what we could do to put this thing together, and let's make it happen.
He was able to build on the King legacy and yet expand the ideas and the ideals to contemporize them for today.
Being the president of SCLC, bless his heart, he had to be able to relate to people. And so he got it. Like I said, he was relatable. And he was just an all-around nice guy, unless.
You will always remember Howard Creasy, because whenever he walked in a room, you knew that the room belonged to him.
When he was in the band, he only played the cymbals, and then he went from just a band member to be the band leader. You could see that in him, you know, and it adds up as it goes along. Everything he touches, he ends up running. And when he runs it well.
I knew that he was going to do something great.
He was always on top of issues. He was always the go-to person. I was at a loss this week during the debt crisis discussion because I wasn't able to get the blow by blow from my friend who would keep up
with current events, keep up with every issue that was burning, and would have the answer before the answer.
He was a little ahead of me at Douglas, but everybody knew the Creasy family. And they were just this larger-than-life family. And of course, you know, Mrs. Creasy was just the epitome of grace and class at Douglas High School, even though I made the ugliest outfit in all of home ec. So when I got to know Reverend Creasy, it didn't surprise me that this larger-than-life personality would belong to Mrs. Creasy, someone with such dignity and class and just boldness and just so handsome.
We both went to Morehouse and ITC in school at the same time. Our fathers were connected, they were classmates, graduated the same year. So we had a small connection, but we just need to strengthen the tie that binds.
Howard, on the one hand, you would see him and he was the best dressed pastor. He was iconic. But at the same time, when he talked to you, you were captivated. He was charismatic. He was never myopic. He always had the big picture in play. But he understood where every move on the chessboard needed to be. And be assured, he always thought 5 moves ahead of his adversary.
He enjoyed life. He was an upbeat human being, always. He always saw he saw the tragic side, but he also saw the amusing, the funny side of life.
Well, Howard probably hadn't had a chance to do too much of anything because Uncle Howard and Gardner has him, and Uncle Howard is walking around, and I can hear him now telling everybody, you met my son Gardner, Reverend Gardner Creasy, but this is my other son Howard.
How do you replace somebody as great and a genius, yet with the humility of a Howard Creasy and all of that? You continue the legacy.
Today we honor and mourn the loss of an extraordinary spiritual and civic leader. The Reverend Howard Creasy Jr. over the years touched the lives of so many of us, whether his role was as pastor, mentor, friend, confidant, or family member. Reverend Creasy always found a way to inspire, and he inspires me still. The Reverend also held an unshakable commitment to civil and human rights. Just this year, he agreed to take the helm of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference as its chairman, with the dream of restoring it to its former glory. He knew that this work was not quite finished, so he accepted that role with vigor and a profound sense of duty. And for that, we should all be very grateful. As with all of you, I cherished my time with Reverend Creasy and will miss him very much. May God bless Reverend Creasy, the entire Creasy family, the Olivet community, and all of you gathered today in his memory. Our city is quiet today in honor of Reverend Creasy.
The safest place is in the will of God. Though trials may come, but it's in the will of God. You may be high, you may be low, but wherever you go, it's all